Welcome in on a Tuesday, everybody. I'm Reed Cowan. The Middle East in turmoil at this very hour. War in the Ukraine also raging. World leaders hearing President Biden's last major address on the global stage. The big question, will his words move the needle on any conflict around the world? Plus, we're also tracking the tropics as thousands in Florida brace for what could be the biggest hurricane so far this season. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Let's go. Right at the top, a look outside UN headquarters in New York City, where President Joe Biden delivered his final address to world leaders at the United Nations General Assembly. The president talked about the growing violence in the Middle East and the need to avoid a wider war. So this is happening as more U.S. troops speed their way to the region as we speak. Biden also referenced the pain felt on both sides of the Israel-Gaza conflict.
The world must not flinch from the horrors of October 7th. Any country would have the right and responsibility to ensure that such an attack can never happen again. Thousands of armed Hamas terrorists invaded a sovereign state, slaughtering and massacring more than 1,200 people, including 46 Americans, in their homes and at a music festival. Despicable acts of sexual violence, 250 innocents taken hostage. I've met with the families of those hostages. I've grieved with them. They're going through hell. Innocent civilians in Gaza are also going through hell. Thousands and thousands killed, including aid workers. Too many families dislocated, crowding into tents, facing a dire humanitarian situation. They didn't ask for this war that Hamas started. I put forward with Qatar and Egypt a ceasefire and hostage deal. It's been endorsed by the UN Security Council. Now is the time for the parties to finalize its terms, bring the hostages home, and secure security for Israel and Gaza free of Hamas' grip, ease the suffering in Gaza, and end this war.
CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang joins us live from New York. Weijia, we've heard the president in recent days keep hope alive that peace can happen in the Middle East. He did that again today. Tell us what his remarks were in that regard first.
Well, Reed, he really struck an optimistic tone and said it is in nobody's interest for this war to continue and to escalate, and that he believed that peace was possible and, that this could somehow be resolved through diplomacy and dialogue. But the problem, Reed, is we don't know what that looks like. We don't know what the path to that is, and the president certainly didn't lay that out either, even though he made the case for the conflict to come to an end. And so, he stressed all the work that he's been doing around the clock to try to broker a successful ceasefire deal that includes hostages being released. But again, that hasn't come to fruition yet. And so he was well aware that there was much more work to be done, but I think he wanted to focus more on everything he was doing in terms of his efforts, because this really was a wide-ranging speech, Reed, that obviously focused on the Middle East, but also, I think he wanted to use this last opportunity on the world stage to cement his legacy when it comes to foreign policy.
Well, speaking of foreign policy, the other hot button on the map of the globe, the president also spoke about his support for Ukraine and its war against Russia. So we want to let our viewers hear a little bit of that. So stay with us and let's roll that sound.
But we cannot let up. The world now has another choice to make. Will we sustain our support to help Ukraine win this war and preserve its freedom, or walk away and let aggression be renewed and a nation be destroyed? I know my answer. We cannot grow weary. We cannot look away. And we will not let up on our support for Ukraine.
So, Weijia, he says that when we know the president is expected to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky this week. What more can you tell us about that meeting?
Well, President Zelensky has been asking for quite some time now for the U.S. to support its use of long-range missiles into Russia, which so far is something that President Biden is not on board with because the risk of escalation and the risk of what that could mean inside of Russia and how it could reshape the war. However, he has been convinced on other things, too. The President, Biden, that is, initially did not support the use of certain tanks for Ukraine or certain fighter jets, and he ultimately came around. And so Zelensky will use this opportunity to try to get the president to align with other NATO allies who believe that is the right course of action. And then Zelensky will also be meeting with Harris and Trump because he wants them to say the same thing that we just heard from President Biden, which is that we have to continue to support Ukraine and we cannot look away. Of course, Trump has suggested otherwise, and that's why it's a real concern for all NATO allies, whether, a Trump administration would continue to provide the robust support that we've seen from the current administration. So Zelensky will really try to use that time to make the case that it's not just about the conflict there, but it really is about stability in the entire region and possibly how that could impact the U.S. as well. So it is a big task ahead for Zelensky, but he has, been doing this for quite some time now and he hopes that will change some minds at the end of the day.
You use that term, make the case, that forum and the forum where you're reporting live from today, the places where world leaders make the case. Wee Jiang, thank you so much for your report. So Ukraine and Gaza, top of mind for other world leaders who followed Biden's remarks. So we want to let you know, Turkey's president also spoke along with the King of Jordan. Here's what they had to say about those two hot spots on the map.
It's very important that diplomacy and dialogue will ensure territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine, and our support for those endeavors of Turkey will continue even strongly.
Now is the time to ensure the protection of the Palestinian people. It is the moral duty of this international community to establish a protection mechanism for them across the occupied territories. This will guarantee the safety of Palestinians and Israelis from extremists who are taking our region to the brink of an all-out war.
So looking to the days ahead, Ukraine's president will address the assembly tomorrow, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will speak Thursday as his country engages in deeper conflicts with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, on that note, Israel and Hezbollah continue airstrikes today. Lebanon's health ministry says Israeli attacks have now killed more than 550, and among the dead, they say, are women and children. Israel says their targets largely hit locations used to store weapons for Hezbollah. Monday marked the deadliest day of fighting between Israel and Hezbollah since 2006. All right, coming home to the United States, this just in. So following that second assassination attempt on Donald Trump in Florida, word that the son of the man sitting in jail connected to that assassination attempt has also been arrested. That son's name is Orrin Ruth. He was caught and cuffed on federal charges of possessing child pornography. This, of course, comes after police searched his home during an investigation. We understand it's unrelated to the other charges. But when they went into that home in North Carolina, they say they found evidence to arrest the younger Ruth on those other charges. By the way, speaking of the federal case against his father, Monday, a federal judge agreed with Justice Department prosecutors in that Florida case that Ryan Ruth should remain in jail while he awaits a case on federal gun-related charges to that assassination attempt. Video to our monitors out of Alabama brings us back to the United States. Police in Birmingham continue to search and try to catch those involved in a mass shooting over the weekend there. In all, 4 people killed, 17 injured Saturday night. So far, nobody arrested for the violence. Crime Stoppers and the FBI joining together to pony up $100,000 for information leading to the arrest and the conviction of that suspect. Let's jump the map now to Missouri, where a death row inmate is scheduled to die tonight by execution. You know, for more than 2 decades, Marcellus Williams has never stopped maintaining his innocence. A jury convicted him of killing a former newspaper reporter back in 1998. Leisha Gale, found stabbed to death in her home at the time. Missouri's governor and state Supreme Court rejected pleas to stop that execution, but we are watching the U.S. Supreme Court, which, by the way, would be the last chance to stop tonight's execution. The Labor Department closely following a possible strike by dock workers at ports all along the East and the Gulf Coast. That strike could do major damage to shipping operations all throughout the United States. Well, top brass reached out to the U.S. Maritime Alliance ahead of that threatened October 1 strike, trying to avert it from happening. The union wants wage increases as well as protection from what they call job-killing automation. Well, just moments ago, former President Donald Trump told voters in Savannah, Georgia, of his plans for incentives to bring foreign companies to the United States. It's all a part of his economic plan that he continues to unveil. Let's listen.
But we're here today to talk about how we're going to launch a historic buildup of American manufacturing muscle and might. This is not a rally, although it feels like a rally. It's really a little event with my 5,000 or 6,000 closest friends in the whole world. But Georgia and Savannah are going to be right in the center of the action. We're going to rebuild our manufacturing, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen fast and beautifully. For years, Americans have watched as our country was stripped of jobs and wealth, and our companies were sold off to foreign countries. You've been watching, and it's been a horror show. I've been watching for many years, and we had it stemmed. And then all of a sudden, bad things happened. Bad things happened. But boy, I'll tell you, we had it stemmed. If we would have had 4 more years, everything, this would be such a different country right now. We would have had no inflation. You wouldn't have Russia attacking Ukraine. You wouldn't have had October 7th with Israel. The Middle East is blowing up. We could be very close to World War III with these characters that don't have any idea what they're doing. But what a shame. In Afghanistan, what a disaster. That was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country, I believe. But GE appliances were sold to the Chinese. IBM computers were again sold to China. Under Kamala Harris, U.S. Steel is now being sold to Japan. I will stop it. We got to do fast. We got to work fast, but we're not going to let it happen. We're not going to let U.S. Steel. 70 years ago, the greatest company on earth, U.S. Steel. Now it's going to be sold off like it was nothing. We're not going to let that happen. We'll build it up. We'll make it strong, but we're not going to let that happen. But with the vision I'm outlining today, not only will we stop our businesses from leaving for foreign lands, but under my leadership, we're going to take other countries' jobs. Did you ever hear that expression before? Have you ever heard that we're going to take other countries' jobs? It's never been stated before. We're going to take their factories, and we had it really rocking 4 years ago. We're going to bring thousands and thousands of businesses and trillions of dollars in wealth back to the good old USA. That's what we're going to be doing it, and doing it fast. And under my plan, American workers will no longer be worried about losing your jobs to foreign nations. Instead, foreign nations will be worried about losing their jobs to America. Going to bring them back. And it won't even be difficult. Your only worry will be deciding which job to take. There will be plenty of them. That will be your biggest problem. Darling, which company should I go with? We're going to bring them back, and we're going to bring them back at levels not to be believed, but you'll believe it in about 2 years from now. You're going to say, wow, that happened fast. You're going to have so many companies wanting to come in because this is where the money is. It won't be if we keep running it like we have for the last 4 years. But this is what they want. This is what they want, and you'll hear the plan. I want German car companies to become American car companies. I want them to build their plants here. I want to beat China in electronics production, and we'll be able to do that easily. We have the greatest genius, the greatest minds here, and then we end up building them in different places. A lot of that's really stupid tax policy. I want GE, IBM, and every other manufacturer that left us to be filled with regret and come sprinting back to our shores, and they will. So as your president, here is the deal that I will be offering to every major company and manufacturer on earth. I will give you the lowest taxes, the lowest energy costs. the lowest regulatory burden, and free access to the best and biggest market on the planet, but only if you make your product here in America. It all goes away if you don't make your product here, and hire American workers for the job. If you don't make your product here, then you will have to pay a tariff, a very substantial tariff, when you send your product into the United States. And by the way, you know, for years they knocked the word tariff, properly used, is a beautiful word. One of the most beautiful words I've ever heard. It's music to my ears. A lot of bad people didn't like that word, but now they're finding out I was right. And we will take in hundreds of billions of dollars into our treasury and use that money to benefit the American citizens. And it will not cause inflation, by the way. And
you are listening in to former President Donald Trump, now candidate Trump, speaking at an event in Savannah, Georgia. He says this is not a rally. It's just 5,000 of my closest friends here. Let's bring in CBS News campaign reporter Torian Small. He's live on the stream on a Tuesday. All right, so former President Torian talked a lot about what he plans to do. Other than mentioning tariffs, he doesn't really say the how-to component of this. What else does he have to say?
Yeah, I think really that's the biggest takeaway that Trump wants to communicate to his supporters, is that under another administration, under another Trump term, the goal here is to get foreign companies to produce their products domestically in the United States. The incentive there is this, and we saw it on the signage at this rally or event that he's calling it, it's not really a rally, that he wants to cut or slash the corporate tax rate from the current 21% to 15%. And again, the real caveat is for products produced domestically here in the United States, Reed.
And of course, Kamala Harris and her campaign hitting back and saying that just passes the costs along to people who have to buy the steel and make products here in the United States. So we're starting to see some differentiation there. Trump is also set to return to the side of that first assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania. What more do we know about that?
Well, this would, again, be the first time that Trump returns back to Butler. This, of course, after that assassination attempt. And since that has happened, we've seen an increase in security protocol around these outdoor events. It's likely that Trump, as we've seen before, will have a bulletproof glass surrounding at the podium. We've also seen an increase in Secret Service agents to his detail. So it's likely that he will still or would look to return to this place as a show of force since that assassination attempt and since a second planned assassination attempt on the former president's life. But also, we've also know that he has felt some of the brunt or has been reeling since that at an event in September. He said that he was still experiencing giddiness when it comes to these public events. One person, it appeared, tried to rush the stage. He said that he jumped at that, Reed. So he's still dealing with this, but this, in his mind, is a way to show resilience.
All right, Torian Small, thank you from our center in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much. So when we come back, we're going to be talking to another one of our campaign reporters, Aaron Navarro. He's talking about the Harris campaign, what the plan is as the polls continue to show a slight advantage for Kamala Harris in the race for the White House. We'll be right back. Vice President Kamala Harris taking a break from the campaign trail today, but that does not mean the rallies have stopped. Republicans are holding an event in Pennsylvania today in support of them, and we're going to be talking about that. That's where we find CBS News campaign reporter Aaron Navarro. So what has the effort to capture the Republican vote look like from the campaign, and is it actually working?
Well, Reed, good to be with you. I think some of the biggest names of Republicans supporting Harris are former Vice President Dick Cheney and former Congresswoman Liz Cheney. It's a sign that their effort to court more known Republican names is continuing. They're holding an event here in Lancaster, a bit of a more exurban, rural county, where they're looking to convince Republicans in the area to support Harris. And from talking to other Democrats in Pennsylvania, they say the effort has worked in part from what they're seeing on door knocking. They're saying that they're hearing more from moderate Republicans, independents, that they are, quote, fed up with the past decade of Trump in politics. January 6th being a big sticking point. But just anecdotally, it'll still be an uphill battle in areas like these. On my way here, driving from D.C., I saw 12 Trump van signs and only 2 Harris wall signs. Signs don't vote, but it's a sign that Trump still has a lot of support in these areas.
Interesting times we live in. I have to disclose to our viewers, when I read that first line in the teleprompter, Republicans for Harris and Walls, I had to question myself, am I getting this right? That's just the times we're living in right now. We're also hearing more from Harris on how she plans to move ahead in the fight for reproductive rights. She continues to make that a part of the narrative. She had this to say, Aaron, in an interview with Wisconsin Public Radio. Let's listen.
It is well within our reach to hold on to the majority in the Senate and take back the House. And so I would also emphasize that while the presidential election is extremely important and dispositive of where we go moving forward, it also is about what we need to do to hold on to the Senate and win seats in the House. That being said, I've been very clear. I think we should eliminate the filibuster for Roe, and we need and get us to the point where 51 votes would be what we need to actually put back in law the protections for reproductive freedom and for the ability of every person and every woman to make decisions about their own body and not have their government tell them what to do.
Right, because she can win the presidency, but if Democrats don't get the House and the Senate, or voting control in the House and the Senate, the balance of power doesn't sway in the favor of reproductive rights and what she's saying. Does this fall in line, Aaron, with her previous statements about reproductive rights? And is it really something she plans to get done before the Biden administration is out of office?
It is in line with what she said before. It's been a big topic of focus for her campaign. But what's new here is her establishing how the political dynamics in Congress would play and her plans to try and restore the protections under Roe v. Wade. She voiced some confidence there that Democrats would continue to hold the Senate. It's a pretty tough Senate map for the party this November. And she voiced support, as she has before as a 2020 candidate, for ending the filibuster rule so that it would only require 51 votes to pass something like protections from Roe v. Wade. What makes it a tall task, though, is that ending the filibuster rules will require 60 votes in the Senate. Unlikely Democrats will win 60 seats or have 60 seats by the time Vice President Harris becomes the next potential president. So potentially some compromise there with other Republicans down the line, but we'll see.
CBS News campaign reporter Aaron Navarro, part of reading and writing American history in real time. We're glad you're out there on the campaign trail for us and on the stream today. No further debates between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, but voters can see the candidates for vice president debate one another. CBS News will host the only vice presidential debate between Senator J.D. Vance and Governor Tim Walz Tuesday. That happens October 1st in New York. You can catch our live coverage on CBS and streaming on CBS News 24/7 and, as always, on Paramount+. Our video monitors now take us down to Florida as thousands brace for the potential of a significant hurricane just a few days from now. You can see that communities helping each other, sandbags going into the backs of trucks. This is in St. Petersburg near Tampa. Governor Ron DeSantis already has declared a state of emergency for 41 counties in that area, just making sure everybody in his state is prepared for the very worst.
Know that this thing's there, know that this could have broad impacts, and we're anticipating impacts. I mean, 100, 200 miles outside of the eye of the storm, you could see with winds and you can see with surge.
Those hurricane hunters are up in the sky while people are down on the ground helping each other. Jess, let's bring you in. What are you seeing on the radar?
It's starting to intensify a lot on our models, and as we head into the coming days, we'll notice that. So as we take a look down in the tropics right now, this storm is still close to the Caribbean. As it moves its way north, here's our model showing it pushing into Florida, where it will take the brunt of the storm. And then we continue to keep a close eye on communities anywhere from Georgia up into central Appalachian as well. Now, I want to start off with where that storm's at, though. Right behind me, you can see it really intensifying within the next 24 hours, all the way into a Category 1 as it makes its way just past the Yucatan Peninsula. Right now, it's still south of Cuba, but as it hits those warm sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico, that's when it jumps from a Category 1 to a Category 3 just before hitting landfall. Right now, As we watch those winds strengthen, it could be anywhere up to around 115 miles per hour as we head all the way into that Thursday forecast, moving its way into the panhandle of Florida. Now the storm will continue up into Georgia with really impressive rainfall totals right now on our models. Futurecast showing the system really starting to gain that strength, though the moment it hits those warmer sea surface temperatures, of course, storm surge is a big concern, damaging winds and widespread heavy rainfall once it does make its way in landfall as we head into Thursday evening. Here's the eye of the storm just into Thursday at 9 p.m. just offshore of communities like Destin, PCB, stretching all the way over into Tallahassee as that moves its way inland. So let's start off with a storm surge close to around 12 feet into communities all highlighted in red. Now, mind you, this isn't as populated as some communities just to the south. Closer to Tampa we go. We're seeing a similar trend all the way down into the Keys. They're going to be the first ones to actually see this impact. Total rainfall is very impressive right now, but as that storm starts to churn closer to our inland areas, we'll have a better number coming up in just a bit. Over to you.
Let's look live at Capitol Hill right now. Lots going on behind closed doors today, including a contempt hearing for Secretary of State Antony Blinken and also a judiciary hearing on the recent Supreme Court presidential immunity decision. So all of this is happening while lawmakers try to avoid a government shutdown. No shortage of active headlines out of our nation's capital. CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian is live in Washington, D.C. Nicole, let's start with this contempt hearing that has to do with a subpoena that was given to Antony Blinken over the State Department's withdrawal from Afghanistan. We know Blinken is really busy right now trying to have talks on Gaza and getting peace there. Did he show up? And if not, why?
Well, he didn't show up, but primarily because there's a lot happening in New York right now, namely the UN General Assembly, which the Secretary of State typically travels to. And of course, President Biden was speaking before the General Assembly today. So he made it clear to the committee that he had prior commitments, that he was going to be there, and that he had personally reached out to the committee and the committee chair to try to find other dates or to even have some members of his staff testify in his stead. So that being said, that wasn't acceptable to the Chairman Michael McCall, who moved forward with these contempt proceedings against the Secretary. He accuses the Secretary of stonewalling the panel as it has been investigating the withdrawal from Afghanistan back in 2021. And so in the committee's view, particularly Republicans on the committee, they believe that this withdrawal was disastrous. That's why they wanted the Secretary to come in today. Democrats, for their part, would also like to hear from him, but they feel that today's proceedings were simply politics given the obvious scheduling conflict.
Well, we know Republicans want to keep that Afghanistan withdrawal in the narrative, in the headlines. We just heard former President Donald Trump speaking at that rally of 5,000 people talking a little bit about that withdrawal from Afghanistan. Nicole, stay with me here because we want to ask you about the work to try to avert a government shutdown. Earlier, we heard from Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson on the matter. Let's let our viewers listen to that.
I'm going to urge the Senate to do their job. As Leader Scalise noted, they have not done that. This is Chuck Schumer's fault. It is not the House Republicans that we're in the position where we have to have a resolution to continue funding the government at the end of the fiscal year. We did our work. We passed 12 appropriations bills through the committee process in record time. We put them on the floor. Almost 73% of federal funding has been passed through the House. We sent it all over to the Senate, and they've done nothing. They did not one bill, and they would not negotiate with us on the top line. So here we are. We loathe CRs as much as anyone, but this is the situation that the Senate Democrat leadership put us in. It would be political malpractice to shut the government down. I think everyone understands that. And so we hope that this will get done quickly and we get everybody back home.
All right, everybody back home. But of course, anytime they do this, and we've seen this over and over in the cycles, this just kicks the can down the road. Any sign that perhaps there can be some consensus in Washington, D.C. To maybe make this something that lasts a little longer, Nicole?
Well, I think that's the point that the Speaker was trying to make, and he has been clear even in doing this short-term continuing resolution to fund the government through December 20th that he does not anticipate, nor does he want, a Christmas omnibus bill to come at the end of this. And this would be like yet another funding bill where everybody tries to tack things on. People don't get a chance to read the bill and they just rush it through because it's right before the holidays. That is a process that the Speaker wants to avoid. So yes, he acknowledges that this isn't really the perfect package and that they are going to have to negotiate around other spending issues and items that didn't make it into this CR, but he doesn't want to see it become this catch-all at the end of the year, and that's why you heard him blaming the Senate because, you know, some of this goes back to the appropriations process. You know, part of why we have these short-term bills is because there's no long-term funding mechanism in place. That's something lawmakers have been working towards, but they haven't been able to get all of those bills across the finish line, particularly, as the Speaker just mentioned, in the Senate.
And the band plays on. Nicole Killian, thank you so much for your live report. All right, when we come back, we're going to drill down on exactly what's happening between Israel and Lebanon. Of course, we know in New York, world leaders are convening, and many of them have a lot to say about what's happening. But we're also going to let you know what has happened in the last 24 hours there. Some very intense strikes happening, many deaths to report, and we'll be watching that and talking about it when we come back. Look out of New York City, where President Biden addressed the United Nations General Assembly this very morning for his final time as commander-in-chief. His address comes as the U.S. is sending more troops to the Middle East amid new attacks between Israel and Hezbollah forces in Lebanon. Listen.
Must not flinch. Since October 7, we've also been determined to prevent a wider war that engulfs the entire region. Hezbollah, unprovoked, joined the October 7th attack, launching rockets into Israel. Almost a year later, too many on each side of the Israeli-Lebanon border remain displaced. A full-scale war is not in anyone's interest. Even if the situation has escalated, a diplomatic solution is still possible. In fact, it remains the only path to lasting security to allow the residents from both countries to return to their homes and the border safely. And that's what we're working tirelessly to achieve.
So by air, Israel continues to strike Hezbollah targets in Beirut for a second day in a row. And you can see the video here behind me. That is the aftermath. CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay reports the U.S. is now sending additional troops to the Middle East in response to these most recent strikes.
The U.S. military is bracing for a wider conflict, sending a small number of additional troops to the Middle East. The Pentagon would not specify how many, only that they would augment the 40,000 already in the region in light of the increased tension. This after waves of missiles landed across Lebanon, 1,600 strikes in all, according to the Israeli military. The attacks continued overnight, setting fire to buildings and homes. Hundreds have been killed and thousands wounded, according to Lebanon's health ministry. The Israel Defense Forces say they sent thousands of text, audio, and video messages warning Lebanese civilians to evacuate as they targeted what they claim are buildings hiding Hezbollah weapons stockpiles. They showed videos, they say, capture secondary explosions after the initial airstrikes as those hidden weapons detonate. Cars choked the highway as people fled into the night, heading north towards the capital, Beirut. The Pentagon says Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has been pressing Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for a diplomatic solution to the fighting. The U.S. State Department is warning all Americans to leave Lebanon while commercial flights are still available. Reed?
Chris Livesay, thank you for that. Riding our video monitors now to Baltimore, we have new updates on the investigation into that tragic Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse. Here's your headline and your update today. The Maryland Attorney General announced his office filed a lawsuit against the owners of that cargo vessel that crashed into the bridge, leading to its collapse.
We file a lawsuit to make sure that they pay for their failure. We will not allow Marylanders to be left with the bill for the gross negligence, mismanagement, and incompetence that caused this harm. No one can deny that the Dolly's destruction of the Key Bridge has caused just that, tremendous pain and suffering that will continue for years to come. The devastation is not limited to the loss of the Francis Scott Key Bridge or the losses at the Port of Baltimore.
So many lawsuits in recent days filed in this case connected to that bridge collapse and what happened there that day. That's because a deadline was set that lawsuits all had to be filed by. So now you're understanding exactly the timing of this. The Attorney General warned the process will take a long time, but continued to emphasize the owners knew the vessel was not fit to sail the seas. 6 construction workers died that day in that collision. Boeing back in the hot seat today. FAA Administrator Michael Whitaker gave an update on how the company is revamping its safety protocols following the Alaska Airlines door incident that happened earlier this year. He said progress is being made, but there's a lot of work left to be done.
Let me be clear. This plan does not mark the end of the FAA's increased oversight of Boeing and its suppliers. There must be a profound shift in the company's safety culture to holistically address its quality assurance and production challenges. Our goal is to make sure Boeing implements the necessary changes and has the right tools in place to sustain those changes in the long term. Since January 5th, we have added more safety inspectors at Boeing and Spirit facilities, and we will maintain our increased on-site presence. Our oversight activities include more direct engagement with company employees, additional inspections at critical points of the production process, and increased auditing of quality systems and build processes.
Is it safe to fly in a Boeing 737 MAX 9?
It is safe. We certify each one of them. We do a final inspection in addition to the Boeing inspection, so we're keeping a close eye on that.
So I'll see you on one.
Whitaker went on to say the agency will continue to provide significant updates and oversights for Boeing, adding the FAA is not ready to hand over the wheel just yet. Boeing also facing major heat from its employees, and here they are, union leaders now reviewing what the company calls its best and final offer on a contract. The union responded, saying it will review the offer and survey their members before putting it to a wider vote. By the way, Boeing gave the union until Friday to accept that best and final offer. Right now, it's unclear whether that offer will be enough to satisfy more than 33,000 striking workers who face furloughs if that strike goes on. Former NFL quarterback Brett Favre testified this morning at a congressional hearing over misuse of welfare funds. Now, according to a Mississippi case, tens of millions of dollars supposed to go to families in a federal reform program instead were used allegedly for corporate gains. And by the way, Favre is linked to $8 million of those misused funds. He's also accused of talking local officials into using the money to build an athletic facility and support the manufacturing of a concussion drug. He's denied all wrongdoing in this case. Listen.
I'm here to share what I've now seen up close about how reforms are needed to stop the misspending of TANF funds. Even before I was sued, when I was informed that the nonprofit appeared to have improperly used TANF funds, I returned to the state the funds I had received. Even though I had provided services to the nonprofit, and even though I knew, and I know, I had done nothing wrong, I returned the funds, no questions asked. I had also offered to help raise funds for a new volleyball facility at Southern Miss, the one that's gotten all the publicity. I wanted to help my alma mater and benefit the community. Southern Miss introduced me to the nonprofit to see if they could help with the funding. I had no way of knowing that there was anything wrong with how the state funded the project, especially since it was publicly approved by many state agencies and multiple attorneys, including the Attorney General. Sadly, I also lost an investment in a company that I believed was developing a breakthrough concussion drug I thought would help others. And I'm sure you'll understand why it's too late for me, because I've recently been diagnosed with Parkinson's. This is also a cause dear to my heart.
Favre is one of dozens of defendants looking to get the funds back where they were intended to go. But you did hear that headline. You heard that other headline coming out of the testimony. Brett Favre breaking the news there during his testimony that he has recently been diagnosed with Parkinson's. He mentioned that he suffered thousands of concussions from playing football, saying it's too late for him to benefit from the drugs that he hoped would come to market to help others, and revealing that Parkinson's diagnosis. When we come back, CBS News 24/7 will take you back to Florida. Thousands bracing for a potential hurricane, while the governor of that state already declares a disaster status to try to get some funds in place to help people who are waiting in those impact zones. We'll be right back. News just in following the second assassination attempt on Donald Trump in Florida. Word now the son of the man sitting in jail connected to that assassination attempt has also been arrested. His name, Orrin Ruth. He was caught and cuffed on federal charges of possessing child pornography. This, of course, comes after police searched his home during an investigation unrelated to those charges. So when they went into that home in North Carolina, they found evidence, they say, to arrest the younger Ruth. By the way, Monday, a federal judge agreed with the Justice Department prosecutors in the Florida case that Ryan Ruth, the father, should remain in jail while he awaits a case on federal charges related to that assassination attempt. Video to our monitors right now out of Alabama brings us back to the United States. Police in Birmingham continue to search for the people involved in a mass shooting over the weekend. 4 people lost their lives, 17 others injured Saturday night, and so far, nobody arrested for the violence. Crime Stoppers and the FBI going together to pony up $100,000 for information leading to the arrest and the conviction of a suspect in that case. Let's jump the map now to Missouri, where a death row inmate is scheduled to die by execution tonight. You know, for more than 2 decades, Marcellus Williams has never stopped maintaining his innocence. A jury convicted him of killing a former newspaper reporter in 1998. Leisha Gale, found stabbed to death in her home. Missouri's governor and state Supreme Court rejected pleas to stop the execution. We're watching the U.S. Supreme Court now at this hour, which would be the last chance to stop what is scheduled to happen tonight. Our video monitors also take us down to Florida now, where a potential hurricane is taking aim at that state as we speak. And you can see right there, neighbor helping neighbor, people there filling sandbags. You're looking at Tallahassee. Governor Ron DeSantis has already declared a state of emergency for 41 counties. It is go time there in the state of Florida, despite the fact that right now you see blue skies and sunny weather there, Jess.
I know, over in Tallahassee, they are gearing up. And it's not just Florida, where, yes, of course, they're going to take the brunt of the storm, but Georgia, stretching up into Appalachians as well. That's going to be the next spot that we're going to keep a close eye on. You see that system just to the south in the Caribbean right now, slowly making its way up into the Gulf of Mexico. And as it hits those warmer sea surface temperatures, the big concern is rapid intensification. Right now, it's at a tropical storm status. Within the next 12 hours, it's going to hit hurricane status as a Category 1, and it's expected to hit a Category 3 as it moves its way into those warmer sea surface temperatures just south of Florida. Watch what happens as we take a look at this track. It's cusping just the edge of the Yucatan Peninsula as it moves its way north. This is where we start to see it really gaining strength when it comes to those center winds. Here we go all the way to the east of areas like Tampa, where it's still out in the center of the ocean. This is what we're expecting, of the Gulf of Mexico. That's where we're expecting to see it really intensify into that Category 3 status before hitting landfall into Thursday. So watching Futurecast, we see that rotation and we see those outer bands already impacting areas like Tampa, stretching down into the Keys just within the next 48 hours. Now here we head into our Thursday and Friday forecast. Thursday evening, that's when it's expected to hit inland. The worst part of that storm initially is just going to be in those overnight hours. We're going to wake up on Friday with storm surges, the #1 concern for many communities stretched throughout our Florida coastline. To add to that, we're also expecting to see anywhere up to around 8 inches of rain in certain communities. We're going to keep a close eye on these models as this system continues to get closer to America. For now, I'm going to send it back to you, Reed.
Our CBS News Eye on America series keeps us rooted in our core value. As always, your stories in your communities. Well, this week in New York City, politicians and business leaders, even scientists from all over planet Earth are meeting to discuss climate change. This conference unfolds against the backdrop of a clear disconnect. So polls show the public wants Congress to do more about climate change. But as CBS News national and environmental correspondent David Schechter is about to show you, many elected officials vote against the ideas that would address the problem.
This may look to you and me like a corrugated rooftop on a Georgia gas station.
Pull it up about 6 inches.
But to solar installer Clay Copeland, it looks like a profit.
Did you get into solar because of climate change?
I got into solar because it's an excellent business model, right? The environment wins. The economy wins.
Copeland's is one of many green businesses flourishing in politically red South Georgia, where the country's largest electric vehicle factory is under construction. And other investments are being driven by the Inflation Reduction Act. The IRA, passed by the Biden administration, is infusing $370 billion to support the renewable energy transition. Copeland says IRA incentives will support 90% of this future solar project.
When you vote, will you be thinking about climate?
Absolutely.
Clay's work led to a shift in how he thinks about climate change, and he's not alone.
70% of Americans say global warming will hurt future generations, and 62% say Congress should do more about the problem.
I want chocolate chip, a single scoop on a waffle cone.
We got a taste of the district with Republican Congressman Buddy Carter.
Hit the jackpot here.
I'm telling you, it's great.
Across the country, 2/3 of all IRA projects are going to GOP-held congressional districts. Carter's district is gaining 4,500 new green jobs, plus $3.5 billion in new investments like EV battery and component factories. In Congress, Carter, who's running for re-election in November, voted against the IRA. He says he opposed the bill because of a non-climate element that lowers the cost of some prescription drugs, but he says stifles innovation.
Is there a contradiction in benefiting from the IRA, but then also saying, I'm not going to vote for this thing?
Why did the leadership put all that together? Why didn't they let us vote on it separately? It probably would have gotten some Republican votes.
You think so?
I'm sure it would.
Would you have voted for it if it was standalone?
You know, I didn't look at it. That was so egregious to me, the prescription drug portion, that's all it took.
Carter helps lead a group of more than 80 Republicans who acknowledge the climate is changing, but fight against what they call radical climate proposals that would hurt the economy, like the IRA. And when it comes to why the climate is changing, the clear-cut science says it's the emissions from our cars, factories, and power plants. But Carter isn't so sure.
If it's not carbon dioxide that we're releasing that's changing the climate, what is it?
I'm not a scientist in that realm, so I don't know what it could be, but I suspect that it could be just natural phenomena.
In Congressman Carter's district, 53% of people worry about climate change. It's a place where they're exposed to the threats of sea level rise and extreme storms like Hurricane Debbie that folks are still cleaning up from. But Carter votes against environmental issues 96% of the time.
If the IRA was up for a vote today, what should your elected officials do?
They should pass it.
Millions of voters like Clay Copeland are speaking, but are their elected officials listening? For Eye on America, David Schechter, Savannah, Georgia.
Well, some new information off of our monitors during that story. Earlier in this broadcast, you heard President Joe Biden addressing world leaders about the U.S. support for Ukraine. Well, we know Ukraine's president will be in Washington with the president very soon, but now we have some new information to break here on CBS News 24/7 out of Washington. This just in, the U.S. confirms it is sending bombs, rockets, and other weapons to Ukraine to bolster their resistance against Russian aggression. This is all part of that new $375 million military package.